Janet Ivanovich had been scheduled for October 12, but had been forced to cancel because of a family matter, a wedding or a funeral. Ramona Norville wasn't sure which. "I know this is short notice," Ms. Norville said in her slightly wheedling final paragraph, "but Wikipedia says you live in neighboring Connecticut, and our readers here in Chicopee are such fans of the Knitting Society gals. You would have our undying gratitude as well as the above-mentioned honorarium." Tess doubted that the gratitude would last much longer than a day or two, and she already had a speaking engagement lined up for October, Literary Cavalcade Week in the Hamptons, but I-84 would take her to I-90, and from 90, Chicopee was a straight shot. Easy in, easy out, Fritzy would hardly know she was gone. Ramona Norville had of course included her email address, and Tess wrote her immediately, accepting the date and the honorarium amount. She also specified, as was her wont, that she would sign autographs for no more than an hour. "I have a cat who bullies me if I'm not home to feed him his supper personally," she wrote. She asked for any further details, although she already knew most of what would be expected of her. She had been doing similar events since she was 30. Still, organizational types like Ramona Norville expected to be asked, and if you didn't, they got nervous and started to wonder if that day's hired writer was going to show up braless and tipsy. It crossed Tess's mind to suggest that perhaps $2,000 would be more appropriate for what was, in effect, a triage mission, but she dismissed the idea. It would be taking advantage. Also, she doubted if all the Knitting Society books put together, there were an even dozen, had sold as many copies as any one of Stephanie Plum's adventures. Like it or not, and in truth, Tess didn't mind much one way or the other, she was Ramona Norville's plan B. A surcharge would be close to blackmail. 1,500 was more than fair. Of course, when she was lying in a culvert, coughing out blood from her swollen mouth and nose, it didn't seem fair at all. But would 2,000 have been any fairer? Or 2 million? Whether or not you could put a price tag on pain, rape, and terror was a question the Knitting Society ladies had never taken up. The crimes they solved were really not much more than the ideas of crimes. But when Tess was forced to consider it, she thought the answer was no. It seemed to her that only one thing could possibly constitute payback for such a crime. Both Tom and Fritzie agreed. 3. Ramona Norville turned out to be a broad-shouldered, heavy-breasted, jovial woman of 60 or so with flushed cheeks, a marine haircut, and a take-no-prisoners handshake. She was waiting for Tess outside the library, in the middle of the parking space reserved for today's author of note. Instead of wishing Tess a very good morning, it was 11:15, or complimenting her on her earrings, diamond drops, an extravagance reserved for her few dinners out and engagements like this. She asked a man's question: had Tess come by the 84? When Tess said she had, Ms. Norville widened her eyes and blew out her cheeks. Glad you got here safe. 84's the worst highway in America, in my humble opinion. Also the long way around. We can improve the situation going back, if the internet's right and you live in Stoke Village. Tess agreed that she did, although she wasn't sure she liked strangers, even a pleasant librarian, knowing where she went to lay down her weary head. But it did no good to complain, everything was on the internet these days. I can save you 10 miles, Ms. Norville said as they mounted the library steps. Have you got a GPS? That makes things easier than directions written on the back of an envelope. Wonderful gadgets. Tess, who had indeed added a GPS to her expedition's dashboard array, it was called a TomTom and plugged into the cigarette lighter, said that 10 miles off her return journey would be very nice. Better a straight shot through Robin Hood's barn than all the way around it, Ms. Norville said, and clapped Tess lightly on the back. Am I right or am I right? Absolutely, Tess agreed, and her fate was decided as simply as that. She had always been a sucker for a shortcut. 4. Lay affairs du livre usually had 4 well-defined acts, and Tess's appearance at the monthly convocation of Books Brown Baggers could have been a template for the general case. The only diversion from the norm was Ramona Norville's introduction, which was succinct to the point of terseness. She carried no disheartening pile of file cards to the podium, felt no need to rehash Tessa's Nebraska farm girl childhood, and did not bother producing bouquets of critical praise for the Willow Grove Knitting Society books. This was good, because they were rarely reviewed, and when they were, the name of Miss Marple was usually invoked, not always in a good way, Ms. Norville simply said that the books were hugely popular, a forgivable overstatement, and that the author had been extremely generous in donating her time on short notice, although, at $1,500, it was hardly a donation. Then she yielded the podium, to the enthusiastic applause of the 400 or so in the library's small but adequate auditorium. Most were ladies of the sort who do not attend public occasions without first donning hats. But the introduction was more of an entr'acte. Act 1 was the 11 o'clock reception, where the higher rollers got to meet Tess in person over cheese, crackers, and cups of lousy coffee. Evening events featured plastic glasses of lousy wine. Some asked for autographs, many more requested pictures, which they usually took with their cell phones. She was asked where she got her ideas and made the usual polite and humorous noises in response. Half a dozen people asked her how you got an agent, the glint in their eyes suggesting they had paid the extra $20 just to ask this question. Tess said you kept writing letters until one of the hungrier ones agreed to look at your stuff. It wasn't the whole truth. When it came to agents, there was no whole truth, but it was close. Act 2 was the speech itself, which lasted about 45 minutes. This consisted chiefly of anecdotes, none too personal, and a description of how she worked out her stories, back to front. It was important to insert at least 3 mentions of the current book's title, which that fall happened to be The Willow Grove Knitting Society Goes Spelunking. She explained what that was for those who didn't already know. Act 3 was question time, during which she was asked where she got her ideas. Humorous, vague response, if she drew her characters from real life, my aunts, and how one got an agent to look at one's work. Today she was also asked where she got her scrunchie, J.C. Penney, an answer which brought inexplicable applause. The last act was autograph time, during which she dutifully fulfilled requests to inscribe happy birthday wishes, happy anniversary wishes, to Janet, a fan of all my books, and to Leah, hope to see you at Lake Toxaway again this summer. A slightly odd request, since Tess had never been there, but presumably the autograph seeker had. When all the books had been signed and the last few lingerers had been satisfied with more cell phone pictures, Ramona Norville escorted Tess into her office for a cup of real coffee. Ms. Norville took hers black, which didn't surprise Tess at all. Her hostess was a black coffee type of chick if one had ever strode the surface of the earth, probably in Doc Martens on her day off.